you will speak for about, I would say, 8 minutes. About, can you tell me how do you assess the EU's position regarding the conflicts, the war in Gaza, in Lebanon, since October 7th?
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to speak here today. And it was really interesting to hear the former panel and also dear Ambassador Regev, naturally. But I would like to start by saying that the relationship between the European Union and Israel has always been complex, and the horrible events of October 7 did only intensify this. I mean, we are dealing with a situation of immense sensitivity, both politically and emotionally, not only for Israel, but also for Europe and the international community. After the unprecedented and brutal Hamas attacks on innocent civilians, the EU initially responded with a wave of solidarity, rightly expressing strong support for Israel's right to defend itself. And this was a moment of clarity, a moment where the EU recognized the gravity of the threat that Israel faced. However, as the horrible situation in Gaza has developed, and as concerns about civilian casualties have grown, we have seen this solidarity weaken, and the region is now facing an increasing threat of instability, not only from Gaza, as we know, but also from Lebanon, with the attacks on Hezbollah, of course, escalating tensions even further. Many within the EU are deeply concerned about a broader regional conflict, and these are legitimate fears, but they also complicate the very nature of our response to Israel's needs for support. And understandably, like we hear from Ambassador Regev, Israel feels an increasing sense of frustration. Despite being a nation under constant threat, despite the unimaginable horrors of October 7, it faces criticism every time it acts in self-defense. And the international community affirms that Israel has the right to defend itself, but when it exercises this right, it's criticized heavily, regardless of how it chooses to respond. And this creates an untenable situation where Israel is constantly under attack, both militarily and diplomatically. And this frustration is palpable in the discussions I've had with Israeli officials and diplomats, but also with European Jews who are deeply concerned about being judged for protecting their citizens. And yet, while we have seen criticism, there have been no significant punitive action, no sanctions, no suspension of diplomatic relations, just criticism. And this signals a somewhat confused EU stance. EU recognizes the right to self-defense, but they struggle to fully support it in practice. And for Israel, this is a sort of great unease, especially given the existential nature of the threat it faces from groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and naturally, as we all know, Iran. And the leadership disconnect within the EU compounds this frustration. High Representative Josep Borrell has, throughout his term, appeared to pursue his personal beliefs rather than reflecting the views of the European Parliament. And this is not a new issue. It has been evident for the past 5 years, during which he has consistently disregarded parliamentary positions, not the least regarding Israel. A prime example is the Parliament's demand to designate the IRGC as a terrorist organization, and demand that Borrell has chosen to ignore. And this did not only anger Israel, but also undermined the authority of the Parliament itself. So the disconnect between the EU leadership and its elected body has caused frustration in multiple fronts, not the least of which is Israel's security. So moving forward, however, I am cautiously optimistic. With a newly elected parliament this summer, there are already signs that the composition is more favorable toward Israel, more understanding of its security needs, and more willing to engage constructively in the region. The potential appointment of a new High Commissioner for Foreign Affairs in the near future offers an opportunity for a more unified and balanced approach toward Israel. I hope that under this new leadership, we can expect better coordination between the EU's executive branch and its legislative body, leading to a stronger and more coherent EU foreign policy. But let me address the heart of the issue that remains unresolved: the hostages. You cannot expect any country, least of all Israel, not to do everything in its power to bring back its hostages. This is not just a question of national security. It is deeply tied to the very identity and history of Israel. This is a country that was built as a homeland for the Jewish people who have faced centuries of persecution, and the safety of its citizens is paramount. Israel's determination to recover its hostages is not just a strategic decision, it's a moral imperative. So what Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran hoped to achieve after October 7 was to fracture Israel's resolve through international pressure. When taking hostages and even transporting the bodies of the victims into Gaza, these groups sought to exploit international sympathy and condemnation in a way that would weaken Israel's response. But this is a grave miscalculation. For Israel, the release of the hostages is non-negotiable. Any viable solution to this crisis must start with the hostages returned. And when Hamas is dismantled, when the immediate threats are neutralized, then we will have a real chance at peace. And this peace will not be just for Israel, but for the Palestinians as well. There is an immense potential to strengthen both the Jewish and Palestinian people in a post-Hamas era. But they will need help. And I believe, like many before, that the Abraham Accords countries will play a crucial role in this. These nations, unlike international organizations such as UNRWA, have the trust of both sides. The Abraham Accords offer a framework of peace and cooperation that can be a true partnership for both Israelis and Palestinians. And this is a model that we, as the European Union, should support and reinforce further. When we look to the future, it is essential to understand the long-term potential of the Abraham Accords. What began as a bold initiative between Israel and its Arab neighbors has the potential to reshape the region. In fact, I believe, like several others, that the Abraham Accords could be the foundation of something much larger, a project similar to the European Union itself. I mean, think about how the EU began, a coalition for peace in the aftermath of World War II. It was an idea rooted in the belief that economic cooperation and mutual security would prevent further conflict. And now, decades later, we see the EU as one of the most significant peace projects in modern history. Similarly, the Abraham Accords have the potential to be the starting point of a broader coalition for peace and stability in the Middle East. If we project 20, 30, or even 50 years in the future, it is not impossible to imagine a Middle Eastern Union built on the same principle of cooperation and mutual benefits that the EU was founded on. And this vision of peace, where nations work together to ensure the security and prosperity of the region, is not just a dream, it's a tangible possibility, and it is something that the EU, with its unique history, should be actively supporting. So in conclusion, I want to reaffirm my belief that the world benefits from stronger EU-Israel relations. Before October 7, we were on the right path, and the EU had taken significant steps toward deepening its ties with Israel, recognizing the importance of this relationship, not only for Israel, but for Europe itself. A strong, stable Israel is a crucial ally in a volatile region, and its success contributes directly to the security of Europe. I am confident that with renewed focus and the right leadership, we can get back on track. But this is not just a political calculation, it's a moral imperative. Strengthening our ties with Israel means standing up for democratic values, for human rights, and for the future stability of the Middle East. The EU must be a reliable partner for Israel, and in doing so, we will not only support the only democratic state in the Middle East, we will also strengthen our own security and prosperity. Thank you.